You have to bring a case based on people's values. If you're talking to someone on the right side of the political spectrum, maybe they're not as community, common good oriented as they are individual self-sufficiency. Great. If you want to be individually self-sufficient, how about putting some solar panels on your house and generating your own power? How about taking some personal responsibility for your community? How about looking at what the Bible says about being a steward of the planet, of the earth? I think it's possible to connect with people through these value-oriented routes as opposed to just pounding them with the number of parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere since 1955. That's not going to move them. But when you talk about asserting your own individuality and taking responsibility for the planet as your faith commands you to, that might be our best hope that we can swing that around on the right.
Hi, and welcome to a new edition of Code Green. It's conversations for a future we want and need and our kids deserve. I'm Betsy Rosenberg. For those of you who haven't met yet, I've been covering the green beat for a long time. All shades of green, went from garbage to global warming. The stories, the news, the events have gotten worse progressively. And we thought that with George W. Bush behind us and moving on to Obama, we would get, certainly with Biden, and we did get with Biden, some action on climate, only to see it clawed back by this Trump administration 2.0. When I read an article by Fred Hewett, who I haven't had the pleasure to meet yet, hello, Fred. He wrote an article for WBUR Radio in Boston. He is a climate and energy policy expert and freelance writer. And he just summed it up perfectly in terms of the juxtaposition, which we do talk about here in these interviews. But I just love the way he went through the month by month by month, talking about the mega events and the mega moves by the Trump administration to pull back what the Biden administration did to finally move us forward. And it was at that point even still not enough, but that many of us have been fighting for all these years, only to see it being ripped away in the face of a planet that seems to be a little hot, maybe on fire. And if you watch CNN or MSNBC, which I can't anymore, former newswoman, I can't handle all the quote news. But my husband has it on. It's Jeffrey Epstein files. Jeffrey Epstein. The man is dead. It's been going on for months. And you would think that there's no other news. So welcome, Fred. And thank you for seeing what I think not enough people see, certainly not enough Americans.
Thanks, Betsy. It's great to be here.
What prompted this particular article, I think I know, but it's the havoc that they are wreaking as in the same news day, Texas floods, fires everywhere, and not just in this country, but across the globe, especially in places, global south, where they, get hit first and worst, those who least contribute to global emissions, rising sea levels, droughts in Sudan. It's as if they don't have a clue. Do they have a clue and they are just in bed with the fossil fuel buddies, or are they really ignorant? Either one is unacceptable. But before you take us through the book of Revelations, as Al Gore called it, most recent, just since January, I'd just like to know, do you think they know what they're doing? Do you think they, as I say, love their kids and grandkids? What's up?
Well, there's a lot of motivated reasoning going on, I believe. I don't think Trump himself is that ideological. I think a lot of this is coming from Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, the Russell votes, and the
American Enterprise Institute, Competitive Enterprise Institute, weren't those the think tanks that were very much stopping?
All of different organizations that are, deeply in bed with the Republican establishment and the tightly woven into the power structure that's currently in the White House. And I think their reality is profit-based, and I think they have convinced themselves that fossil fuels are good. And they have, as I say, motivated reasoning, motivated by their bottom line more than anything. These people have been immersed in the fossil fuel industry for decades. They view it as a right and virtuous thing, and they're willing to rationalize their continued dominance of the energy mix by any means possible. And sometimes that's a paper-thin rationalization. I think that's what we're dealing with. I think Trump derives power from these people, from their money, from their influence, from their economic clout. And he's willing to buy in to their belief system just because it's politically expedient at this point.
Politically expedient and climactically devastating. Could the stakes be any higher, especially for our children and grandchildren?
True. I think when I say politically expedient, it's more about firming up his base and keeping that solid 40-45% of the population in his camp. People do like renewable energy. People do not believe that climate change is phony. People want to see a cleaner energy environment and a cleaner energy economy, and they realize that the weather is changing, the climate is changing. We are getting more heat waves. We are seeing more severe precipitation and so forth. We can write it all down, but most people can just see it with their own eyes.
But why did half the country roughly vote for Trump 2.0, knowing, he pulled us out of Paris very proudly and quickly the first time and did it, almost the first day again, which makes zero sense. Of course, the Paris Accords, not even binding, but it was just, again, too little, too late, but much needed, gave everybody who's been working on this around the world for decades a boost, much needed, shot in the arm of inspiration to pull it back. It's just so arrogant and ignorant.
Well, as you probably know, Betsy, most people don't vote on climate issues. Now, you and I, for us, it's a major point.
Life and death. Life and death. Hello.
Exactly. But, you look at the polls, the exit polls from the elections, and even in blue states, climate change is, if it comes in the top 10 reasons that people base their decision on, that's fairly unusual. It's the hot button issues. It's the immigration, the economy, the inflation, even things like crime, which, these emotional topics, reproductive issues, transgender issues, which affect a tiny sliver of Americans. Tragically, these issues push climate change out of the picture, and people don't really vote on that, from what I've seen.
And I do fault corporate media, which I was in for most of my career, for not connecting the dots, not covering it nearly enough and adequately. They're starting to, but it's a little too late. And the last 20 years plus that I've been on this beat, they really have been doing de minimis. I think that has to be a big part of the problem. People have not really seen those connections, or why would they vote against their children's self-interest? It's kind of a circular thing, because so many people said to me, well, Betsy, people who voted for Trump, I have a few in my family, it's just not what people are thinking about. It's not what people are talking about. It's not their top priority. And I say, exactly the problem, right? And if they knew what we knew, I think they would vote differently. And how do we get them to know what we know, which is why I've been at this little independent green, media person, trying to raise awareness and, shout from the mountaintops that this is the big story. This is the big threat, which will, by the way, impact health, economy, crime. I'm not sure about reproductive issues, or transgender, but it's certainly, and then look at what's going on with inflation. I just read an article. There's a new term, climateflation. And for my cousin who voted for Trump and said, oh, but the price of eggs and the food costs and inflation. Guess what? It's global climate change and the extreme weather events that's contributing to that and will continue to. So no, it wasn't Biden's fault that the price of groceries went up. So it's a lack of connection of these issues, I think, that we have to overcome. How can we do that, do you think? Quickly.
Yeah. I happen to have a solution in my back pocket. I've been holding on to it. No.
Scoop.
That's you and I have been on the same journey, Betsy, because I've been talking to people and writing for quite a while now. And you're probably familiar with David Roberts, who is a well-known podcaster, and he had the same experience where he said, I had this naive view that if I kept putting the facts out there and explaining exactly what was going on and getting the word out, then people would just see the light and come around.
Silly us.
For some reason, it's not happening that way. And I don't know if it takes a flood or something in your city to change your mind, or that a relative dies from heat stroke or something like that. Or maybe just your energy bills are out of control because you ran your air conditioner so hard last summer. It's just it's an upward battle, and I wish I had the magic key to open that door.
And just to show you how far this goes back, Dave Roberts, when he was working for, was it Grist or Tree Hugger, one of the early
Yes.
newsletters, he did a feature on me, 2004, when I was starting my program on Air America, the late great liberal radio network, for 2.5 bumpy years. He did a column called Interactivist, and he profiled me. And that was the last press I've gotten, but that was exciting at the time. And he's, of course, gone on to write for, is it Canary and many other publications.
Oh, he was with Vox, but now he has his own Volts
Yeah,
podcast. I think it's remarkably successful.
super smart, wonky, incredible knowledge. So I just stick to the simpler version, interviews of the experts, so you can have all the wonky stats that I can't remember. But yeah, some of us have been at this a long time, thinking, I guess, naively, that if we just get the information out there and the inspiration, really show people how important this is and how actually exciting it is to be part of the movement of our century, I'm quite sure. And once people do join us, the community, either formally to go to conferences or just reading about this stuff, they get not only concerned, of course, that's appropriate, but excited. A sense of, oh, I want to share this. And that's why I invite people, really, especially those who are feeling disillusioned, and there's so many and so many reasons to be, who feel isolated in their concern, to really, well, tune into Code Green and other places where you can find people like Fred to inspire us. But before we go too far ahead, just sort of walk us through, as you did in your column, like, the big, beautiful bill, not so beautiful for the planet. The rolling back of the EPA endangerment clause, WTF, as children are being swept down a river in Texas, some of them never to have been, well, one child has still not been found. And that when we just moved from Texas, and they don't talk about climate change much there, and perhaps if they had, there would be better precautions taken.
Well, I felt it was important to just put a marker down and say, this is where we are in August 2025. Trump has been in office for 8 months. And in that time, he has systematically and determinedly and doggedly attacked every climate policy on the books. And I felt it was necessary to just juxtapose the information space in which that policy campaign was occurring. And the headlines, as you pointed out, day to day, are just full of climate catastrophes. And that sounds like hyperbole, but if it's your wheat crop that gets destroyed or your house that gets swept away, that's fair to call a catastrophe. And you don't have to dig into the headlines very deep to find these things, not just in the United States, but around the world, in South America, in India, in Pakistan. Temperatures are bordering on unlivable, where the human body simply cannot tolerate it. In Arizona, they do these studies of, okay, how many people died this summer in Maricopa County? And they can correlate the number of people who usually die with the actual number. And they say, we have all these excess deaths. What do we attribute that to? Well, you look at the heat wave data for the year, and it's off the charts. So, and it's ironic because Arizona has the best conditions for solar energy in the country, and they're still burning coal. They're doing better, but we live in this strange world now where we are burning up. And again, I don't want to sound like the Book of Revelations or apocalyptical pronouncements like, it's a beautiful day here in Cambridge, the sun is out and we're enjoying some comfortable weather. But gosh, when you see what's going on in the world and you see the patterns, you see the attribution science, I think is very important. The models that are now available to us to correlate climate disaster with rising temperatures and warming. They have these very sophisticated models now that can say what the increased likelihood or the increased severity of a weather event is based on the warming conditions. And this isn't saying the hurricane was caused by climate change. They're saying, no, The hurricane was made more likely and made more severe by climate change, and they can state that with a degree of confidence. So the policy actions are coming at a time when we can verify that climate change is the culprit. Climate change is having a human cost in terms of lives lost, in terms of people losing their property and their resources. It's also having a huge economic cost in terms of property destruction and just the general loss of productivity throughout the economy. And yet, they march forward. The endangerment finding that you mentioned that's being repealed or rescinded as the correct term, this is, I think, particularly galling, and it's the most kind of in-your-face, middle finger raised kind of.
The libs, stick it to the libs, right? Is that what this is?
Yeah, exactly. This is the one we want, and we're just going to go for it. And for your listeners, viewers who aren't familiar with it, I'm sure most of them are, the endangerment finding was a finding by Obama's EPA in 2009 that basically said, yes, carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases are a threat to public health. And this followed a Supreme Court ruling, Massachusetts versus EPA, in which the Supreme Court did assert that the EPA had the authority to regulate greenhouse gases. The dissenting opinion in that case, the jurist who said that climate change, greenhouse gases cannot be regulated by the EPA, was John Roberts. That's what we're facing as they now try to rescind the endangerment finding. The DOE, Department of Energy, has published a report to back up the EPA. It has been ridiculed and mocked and torn apart piece by piece by climate scientists. And yet, by the end of this month, it's likely when the comment period is over, EPA will ignore the comments, go ahead, rescind it, and then we'll go to court. And then John Roberts' court will have to, face the music or face the science and say, oh, climate change isn't the problem. It's an absurdity. You and I know that. And yet that's the age we're living in.
Just one big sigh. That's what I want to do is I want to see the John Roberts, the people who are somehow not embarrassed, who show their ignorance or arrogance and or bad combination, add greed, and it's particularly ugly. Like I encouraged through, going to events, fundraisers for Hillary Clinton, we would I'd go up to her volunteer staff and say, have her ask about climate change. Donald, what are you going to do about it? In the debates, bring it up more. And that's part of the problem is even the Democrats were reluctant because polls show Americans aren't concerned about this. Well, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy or a circular thing. And look where we are still. Okay. And Trump never gets pushed on this, by reporters enough. He wiggles out of everything, of course. My fantasy, call me strange, would be to corner him and just say, don't you love your kids? What do you think is going to be the future if you bring in more coal? If you roll back all this progress that is desperately needed, like they never have to answer, Isn't that frustrating?
Well, it is. And I think with Trump, a big motivating factor was, the Inflation Reduction Act, which included some terrific climate policy, was Biden's, really the centerpiece of his administration, along with the CHIPS and Science Act and the infrastructure bill. The IRA was the signature achievement of Biden. And anything that Biden did or Obama did is automatically something that Trump wants to undo. Now, I want to get back to one other question that you raised, like how do we talk to people? Some of the wisest people I've read say that you have to talk about values. You have to bring a case based on people's values. If you're talking to someone on the right side of the political spectrum, then maybe their values are different than yours, but maybe they're not as community common good oriented as they are individual self-sufficiency. Okay, great. If you want to be individually self-sufficient, how about putting some solar panels on your house and generating your own power? And how about taking some personal responsibility for your community? How about looking at what the Bible says about being a steward of the planet, of the Earth. I think it's possible to connect with people through these value-oriented routes, as opposed to what we were talking about before, just pounding them with, the number of parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere since 1955. That's not going to move them. But when you talk about asserting your own individuality and taking responsibility for the planet as your faith commands you to, that might be our best hope that we can swing that around on the right.
I'm smiling because I just lived through that. My husband and I were living in Texas Hill Country for the last 7 years, and we were the first home out of 200 in our development to put solar panels on. Oh, here come the Californians. And our neighbors, next door neighbors, fought it, even though you couldn't even barely see them from their house, probably in the oil and gas industry. And they ended up moving because the HOA approved us, and partly because they have to, because unless you're really impeding your neighbor's enjoyment of the property, I think that's what's written into the regulations, you can't stop it. But they were just philosophically opposed to solar. That's what they said. And they ended up moving after we put our solar panels on, and they didn't show enough. I wanted, more neighbors when they drove by to see it from the street to be inspired. One other home did that. But when we were at the HOA and they were saying, well, why would you want to put solar panels on? Energy is so cheap in Texas. And most of these people look to be grandparent age. And my husband said, for my granddaughter. And I looked around the table and I said, and for all your grandkids. And I don't know if that had an impact or not, but that was like a kind of a aha moment. So we had mixed reaction. I think that we made maybe some inroads with those 7 people around that table, but our neighbors solved the problem by being offended by solar panels by moving to another part of the development. So this is real world stuff you're talking about, not hypothetical.
It's hard to believe. I put up 5 kilowatt system on my roof about 5 years ago now, and I did have the capital to fund it, which I know a lot of people don't. I know it's hard for renters and such,
but your energy bills, your electricity bills are so cheap.
Zero. It's not cheap.
Yeah.
It's zero.
Yeah.
And it has been for 5 years. And I get these nice emails from utility every month saying, we're canceling your bill this month because you have a credit balance.
And the same thing happened 25 years ago when we put up solar panels on our home in Mill Valley, California. The meter just spun backwards and our electric bills were really, really almost negligible. So it's not even just a new phenomenon. As I said back then, the solar industry is experiencing a 30-year overnight success. And we are 30 years later. So what do you think? Where is solar? Where is wind? And what about rolling back that nearly completed wind farm off the coast of somewhere in, I think, New England?
In Rhode Island. Okay.
Yeah, those
two questions. I think I'm very bullish on solar. California is doing an awesome job with solar. China is just strategically, they don't want to import oil. They're building massive solar farms.
Yep.
And, it's smart and it's getting cheaper. In Germany, they're hanging solar panels on their balcony. And then now Utah is allowing that as well. Solar is just such a no-brainer now. It's so inexpensive. In New England, where we don't have as much land, solar is a little tougher question because we don't really want to cut down carbon sinks, forest, in order to put up solar farms. And we have a limited amount of agricultural land that we can convert to solar. So it's a little tougher to do massive, 100% kind of California scale solar in my region of the country. But offshore wind is the obvious alternative to that because there's a great big ocean right off the beach here. And the very first thing I wrote about for my climate activism was a piece about offshore wind in Massachusetts 10 years ago when it was just getting off the ground. And now we have several wind farms that had been started or financed or planned. One of them is up and running. Well, there was a pilot project in Rhode Island, but I'm not counting that. We have a project that is mostly complete called Vineyard Wind. I believe it's only about 500 to 600 megawatts. Revolution Wind, which is a 700 megawatt project off the coast of Rhode Island, which was going to deliver energy to Connecticut and Rhode Island, was stopped, 80% complete. And all these bogus reasons we're giving about,
National security threat.
Russian drone swarms are going to come through it. And this is just this petty, capricious thinking on the part of the president, who, as it is well known, didn't like the view of the turbine off the coast of Scotland near his golf course.
Right.
And he got a bug up his butt that said, I'm not going to allow offshore wind. And he is such a power drunk that if he feels that he can stop it just by fiat, then that's what he's going to do. And so Department of Interior, ironically, again, Doug Burgum, Interior, North Dakota gets so much of it. I forget the exact percentage. I think it's like they do 40-something% of their electricity generation with wind in North Dakota, where the Secretary of the Interior is from. And yet he's saying New England cannot have wind power. Okay.
Right. And then there's Chris Wright and Lee Zeldin, but we don't have time to go into all those wonderful people who are in the jobs that they really deserve and should be in, right? Wrong.
Right.
Well, you talked about petty, and that is Trump, among other adjectives, but the consequences are anything but petty. So do you have hope that this can be reversed? See, people don't realize that this is very late in the climate window closing stage, and we are late in this, and we can ill afford this. And that's what I worry about, that, some things, the pendulum swings back, on politics and issues,
Yep.
but not so much with this. And of course, they're worried about government waste. Well, how efficient is it to claw back, on a project that's almost finished, or take back EV mail trucks that are in the process of being spread out, and EV chargers that are being implemented? It's just, the hypocrisy's off the chart. I say that every week, I know, but there's got to be another word for it, really, because it goes beyond the pale.
I think you and I have good instincts about what the right thing to do is, what the thing that will best ensure the future of the societies around the world. I think you and I understand that. I don't think that has driven history. I think history has been driven by economic forces largely, but that can be a hopeful thing for us, because the economics of the energy transition are starting to stack up against fossil fuels. I really believe that. And some people, I'm very sympathetic with them, see Trump as sort of the last stand for fossil fuels. They're doing a lot of things to try to entrench fossil fuels as kind of a last-ditch effort to fend off the assault of solar and wind, especially solar, which is just getting so ridiculously cheap.
It's the last.
I'm sorry?
It's the last gasp of fossil foolery.
Well put. And let's not discount nuclear. As I was saying about the land constraints here in New England, we currently get about 25% of our electricity generation from nuclear here in New England. If they can get a price breakthrough and start getting more competitive on the economic side, there are a lot of advantages to nuclear, despite some ongoing problems. And I don't discount that nuclear is going to be part of the equation as well.
Thank you, Fred, for your contributions to this. Keep fighting, keep writing, perhaps post this interview where you can, because it won't do any good if we get it, we smart green people. We need to spread the, eco-literacy information quickly and loudly. And that's why I do this. That's why you do this. So many committed activists do this. And by the way, if you are watching, and I hope you are, please subscribe to the YouTube channel for Code Green, and like it, share it. We need to get a lot more viewers before we can get some sponsors in, but Lord knows there's a lot of green companies out there. And, green media, as an independent producer, doesn't get a lot of funding. I'll just say that. Investors don't believe in, and they don't think media is profitable to invest in. Philanthropists, for some reason, don't see that this is seemingly the only way we're going to properly educate the public if corporate news media is really not doing their job. So I don't know what else to do, but let's please try to tell everybody you care about that this is for them, not for us. We know. We just want to share it with all of you. So thanks for joining us. And thank you so much, Fred, for your contributions.
Thank you, Betsy. It was really a pleasure. I enjoyed the conversation.
Have a great green day and spread it.